Montana Territory, 1875. The vast prairie stretched like an endless sea beneath a sky painted in shades of crimson and gold as the sun began its descent. Nestled in the shadow of the Big Belt Mountains, the small town of Riversbend clung to existence, a fragile outpost of civilization amidst untamed wilderness. It was a place where men carried their pasts like additional weight in their saddlebags, and women fortified their hearts against loss as surely as they barred their doors against the night. Noah Lawson had drifted into Riverspend on a cool autumn afternoon, trail dust coating his denim pants and faded blue shirt. At 25, he'd already wandered more of the frontier than most men saw in a lifetime. Tall and broad-shouldered with sun-bronzed skin, he carried himself with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in the saddle. His hazel eyes, quick to smile but guarded in their depths, surveyed the town from beneath the brim of his well-worn Stetson. The townsfolk regarded the newcomer with customary wariness. Another drifter they thought here today, gone tomorrow, just like all the others who passed through, seeking something they couldn't name and rarely found. Noah didn't mind their assumptions. They served him well. The less people knew about him, the better. He'd learned that hard lesson years ago on a blood-soaked day outside Laramie. The memory still visited him in dreams, the sound of gunfire, the weight of a dying friend in his arms, the knowledge that attachment was a luxury he couldn't afford. Not in this unforgiving land. A man on the move stays ahead of trouble, his father had told him before consumption took him. It was a philosophy Noah had embraced wholeheartedly. He found companionship where he could, in saloons and dance halls, with women whose names he'd forget by the time he crossed the next county line. It wasn't love, but it was enough. It had to be. 3 days, he told himself as he secured a room above the town's only saloon. 3 days to rest his horse, replenish supplies, and move on. The pattern was familiar, comforting in its simplicity. A man couldn't get hurt if he never stayed long enough to care. He spent his first evening at the saloon, nursing a whiskey and observing the locals. The establishment was modest compared to others he'd frequented, a long bar of polished oak, a handful of tables occupied by ranchers and miners, and a small stage where a piano player coaxed melancholy tunes from yellowed keys. New in town, the bartender placed a fresh glass before him. Noah nodded, just passing through. That's what they all say, the man chuckled, wiping down the counter. Name's Frank. Been running this place 15 years now. Noah Lawson, he offered no more information and Frank didn't press. Well, Mr. Lawson, first drinks on the house. Welcome to Riversbend. Noah raised his glass in silent thanks, his attention drawn to the batwing doors as they swung open. The woman who entered moved with quiet dignity, her presence immediately commanding the room without seeking attention. She wore a simple navy blue dress that accentuated her slender frame, and her chestnut hair was gathered in a practical knot at the nape of her neck. She couldn't have been more than 22, yet there was a maturity in her bearing that spoke of experiences beyond her years. Frank followed Noah's gaze and lowered his voice. That's Zara Goodwin, widow, lost her husband 'bout a year ago. Mountain fever took him quick, she runs the general store now. Noah watched as she approached the bar, noting the slight hesitation in her step, the way her eyes, a striking shade of blue, scanned the room with cautious awareness. Evening, Mrs. Goodwin, Frank greeted. Your usual. Please, her voice was soft but clear. Up close, Noah could see the delicate features of her face, the faint dusting of freckles across her nose, and the subtle signs of weariness that spoke of long days and longer nights. She glanced at Noah, a flicker of curiosity crossing her features before she looked away. I don't believe we've met. Noah Lawson, ma'am, he tipped his hat, just arrived. Welcome to Riversbend, Mr. Lawson. I hope you find our town hospitable. Her smile was polite but reserved. Thank you, Mrs. Goodwin. I don't plan on imposing on that hospitality for long. Something in her expression shifted, perhaps recognition of a fellow soul accustomed to guarding their words. Few do, Mr. Lawson, yet some find reasons to stay. Frank placed a small glass of sherry before her. Your delivery came in today. Ben unloaded it at the store. Thank you, she sipped her drink, her attention seemingly focused on the amber liquid, though Noah sensed her awareness of his continued gaze. If you're in need of supplies, she said after a moment, my store opens at 7. We received new stock from St. Louis yesterday. Noah nodded. I'll keep that in mind. She finished her drink, placed a coin on the counter, and with a nod to both men, departed as quietly as she'd arrived. Runs that store better than her husband ever did, Frank commented as the doors swung shut behind her. Town council wasn't keen on a woman taking over, but she proved them wrong quick enough. Noah said nothing, but his thoughts lingered on the widow's measured words and the shadow of solitude he'd recognized in her eyes, a reflection of his own. Dawn broke clear and cold the next morning. Noah rose early, completing his usual routine of exercises that kept him fit for the rigors of trail life. After a simple breakfast, he made his way to the general store, reasoning that it was practical to assess the available supplies before making his purchases. A bell chimed softly as he entered. The store was well organized, shelves neatly stocked with everything from canned goods to tools, fabric to ammunition. Mrs. Goodwin stood behind the counter, assisting an elderly woman with a selection of buttons. "Just a moment, Mr. Lawson," she called without looking up. He hadn't expected her to remember his name, and the recognition gave him pause. After completing the sale, she turned her attention to him. In the morning light streaming through the large windows, he noticed the rich mahogany highlights in her hair and the graceful line of her throat above the high collar of her forest green dress. "What can I help you with today?" she asked. "Just restocking trail provisions, coffee, beans, jerky, the usual." She nodded, moving from behind the counter to help him locate the items. "How long have you been traveling, Mr. Lawson?" The question seemed innocent enough, but Noah had developed a wariness of personal inquiries. "Long enough to appreciate a well-stocked store when I find one." A slight smile touched her lips. "And evasive answers, apparently." He couldn't help but return the smile. "Force of habit, ma'am." "I understand." She reached for a tin of coffee on an upper shelf, the movement revealing the slender line of her wrist below her cuff. "The West doesn't encourage oversharing." They moved through the store, gathering his supplies with efficient ease. Noah noticed how she anticipated his needs, suggesting items he hadn't mentioned but would certainly require. "You seem familiar with what a traveler needs," he observed. "My husband was a restless man before we settled here," she replied, her tone matter-of-fact rather than sorrowful. "And I've outfitted enough drifters to recognize the pattern." As she tallied his purchases, the door opened again, admitting a well-dressed man whose confident stride and expensive boots marked him as someone of means. "Mrs. Goodwin?" He removed his hat, revealing slicked-back dark hair. "Lovely as always." Zara's posture stiffened slightly. "Mr. Reynolds, what can I do for you?" "I've come to extend another invitation to dinner, tomorrow evening at the hotel. The chef is preparing something special." Noah watched the exchange with interest, noting the contrast between Reynolds' forward manner and Zara's cool response. "That's very kind, but I'm afraid I must decline. The new inventory requires my attention." Reynolds' smile remained fixed, though his eyes hardened. "You work too hard, Zara. A woman needs diversion." "Mrs. Goodwin seems to know her own needs well enough," Noah interjected, his voice casual but his meaning clear. Reynolds turned, assessing Noah with a dismissive glance. "I don't believe we've been introduced." "Noah Lawson." "Victor Reynolds. I own the Silver Creek mine and several properties in town." The implication of his status hung in the air. "Just passing through, Mr. Lawson." "That's the plan." Reynolds nodded as if confirming his own assumptions. "Well, don't let me interrupt your business." He turned back to Zara. "Think about my offer, Mrs. Goodwin. A woman alone faces many challenges in a place like this." After he left, Noah noted the slight tremor in Zara's hands as she resumed wrapping his purchases. Persistent fellow. Unfortunately, she tied the package with string, her composure quickly regained. "Mr. Reynolds believes that as the wealthiest man in Riversbend, he's entitled to certain considerations." "And what do you believe, Mrs. Goodwin?" She met his gaze directly, something fierce and proud in her blue eyes. "That I'd rather face the challenges of being alone than the compromise of being with the wrong person." The words struck Noah with unexpected force. He'd never considered his wandering as a choice of integrity, merely one of necessity and habit. Yet here was this young widow, choosing solitude over security for reasons he recognized in his own heart. "That's quite a stance in a place where survival often dictates compromise," he said. "Perhaps," she handed him his packages, "but I suspect you understand that position better than most, Mr. Lawson." He did, though he wasn't ready to admit it. "What makes you say that?" "Your eyes," she spoke matter-of-factly. "They're watchful, like someone who's learned the hard way to be cautious, and they don't match your easy smile." Noah felt unexpectedly exposed, as if this quiet shopkeeper had somehow read pages of his life that he kept carefully hidden. "You're observant, Mrs. Goodwin." "In my position, it's necessary." She moved back behind the counter. "Will there be anything else today?" He should have said no, gathered his supplies, and maintained the distance that had served him well for years. Instead, he heard himself asking, "Does the town have a decent livery stable? My horse could use some proper care." "Morgan's livery at the end of the street. Tell him I sent you." She hesitated, then added, "And if you're looking for honest work while you're here, the Hendersons' ranch lost 2 hands last week. They're short-handed for their cattle drive." "I appreciate the information, but I don't stay in one place long enough for regular work." Of course, something in her expression, not quite disappointment but a knowing acknowledgement, made him uncomfortable. "Safe travels when you go, Mr. Lawson." He tipped his hat and left, unsettled by the conversation. By midday, he'd convinced himself that remaining detached was the wisest course. By sunset, he'd secured a 2-week position with the Henderson Ranch, telling himself it was merely practical to replenish his funds before moving on, if the prospect of further encounters with the intriguing Mrs. Goodwin influenced his decision, he refused to acknowledge it, even to himself. The days passed with the rhythm of ranch work, dawn to dusk labor that left little time for contemplation. Noah found himself slipping into the routine with surprising ease, earning the respect of the other hands through his horsemanship and willingness to tackle the hardest tasks without complaint. On his 5th day in Riversbend, he encountered Zara again at the small church that served the community. He wasn't a religious man, but something had drawn him to the Sunday service, perhaps curiosity, perhaps the simple human desire for connection, however temporary. She sat 3 rows ahead, her hair arranged more elaborately than he'd seen before, crowned with a modest hat. The blue of her dress matched the shade of her eyes, and when she turned slightly during a hymn, their gazes met briefly. Her nod of recognition was followed by a smile that seemed warmer than those she'd offered in the store. After the service, as congregants mingled outside, Noah found himself approaching her. "Mrs. Goodwin, good morning." "Mr. Lawson." "I didn't expect to see you here." There was no judgment in her tone, only mild surprise. "Thought I'd see what passes for salvation in these parts," he replied with a half-smile. She studied him as if trying to determine whether he was mocking faith or genuinely seeking something. "And what did you find?" "Good singing, decent sermon, questionable coffee." He nodded toward the church hall where refreshments were being served. Her laugh was unexpected and transformative, a genuine sound that lightened her features and revealed a dimple in her left cheek. "Pastor Williams means well, but his wife brews coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe." Experience suggests that's a common trait in frontier settlements. Indeed, her gaze shifted past him and her expression cooled. Noah turned to see Reynolds approaching, dressed in an expensive suit that seemed excessive for the modest church. "Mrs. Goodwin," Reynolds tipped his hat, "you look enchanting today." "Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. I was hoping you might join me for lunch at the hotel." Before she could respond, a commotion drew their attention. A horse had broken free from a hitching post and was charging down the street, heading directly toward a young boy crossing with his mother. Noah reacted instinctively. In 3 long strides, he reached the child, sweeping him up and pushing the mother aside just as the horse thundered past. The animal's shoulder clipped him, spinning him around, but he maintained his footing and kept his grip on the boy. "Thomas," the mother cried, rushing forward to reclaim her son. Noah handed the child over, checking him quickly. "He's all right, ma'am, just scared." Several men had already pursued the runaway horse, and the excitement quickly subsided. Noah became aware of a dull pain in his shoulder but dismissed it as inconsequential. When he turned back toward the church, he found Zara watching him, her expression a mixture of concern and something else, assessment, perhaps, or reevaluation. "That was quick thinking, Mr. Lawson," she said as he rejoined her, Reynolds having moved away during the commotion. "Just happened to be standing close," he replied, rotating his shoulder experimentally. "You're hurt." "It's nothing." Her eyes narrowed. "Your definition of nothing involves wincing when you move. Come with me." "Mrs. Goodwin." "My home is just behind the store. I have liniment and bandages." Her tone brooked no argument. "Unless you prefer to explain your injury to Dr. Phillips, who will certainly ask more questions than I will." Put that way, Noah found he had little choice. Lead the way, then. Her home was modest but well kept, with simple furnishings arranged with care. Noah noted the small touches that made it a home rather than merely a dwelling: books stacked by a comfortable chair, dried wildflowers in a blue vase, a quilt draped over the sofa. "Sit there," she directed, pointing to a kitchen chair. "I'll get my supplies." She returned with a basin of water, clean cloths, and a bottle of liniment. "You'll need to remove your shirt so I can see the injury." Noah hesitated, then complied, unbuttoning his shirt with his good arm and slipping it off to reveal a rapidly forming bruise across his shoulder and upper chest. Zara's clinical gaze assessed the damage. "Nothing seems broken, but that's going to pain you for a few days." She dipped a cloth in the water and began to clean away the dust and grit from his skin with brisk, efficient movements. Noah remained silent, acutely aware of her proximity, the faint lavender scent that clung to her, and the gentle pressure of her hands as she worked. It had been a long time since anyone had tended to him with such care. "You've had worse," she observed, noting the scars that marked his torso. The jagged line across his ribs from a knife fight outside Santa Fe, the puckered circle on his left shoulder from a bullet that had come too close. "Hazards of the trail," he replied. She applied the liniment with methodical thoroughness. "Most men who carry such marks don't live to accumulate more. You must be either very skilled or very fortunate." "Perhaps a bit of both." He winced as she pressed on a particularly tender spot. "Sorry," her touch gentled. "These scars tell quite a story, Mr. Lawson." "Not one worth hearing." She paused, her fingers resting lightly on a long-healed wound near his collarbone. "I disagree. Every scar is a survival." "That seems worth acknowledging, at least." The simple statement, delivered without drama or expectation, caught him off guard. Most people either avoided mentioning his scars or probed with morbid curiosity. Zara's matter-of-fact acknowledgement of their significance, without demanding their stories, felt strangely like respect. "Your husband," he said, seeking to shift the focus from himself. "The fever that took him, was it sudden?" Her hands resumed their work, wrapping a bandage around his shoulder. 3 days from first symptoms to last breath. "We'd been married less than 2 years." "I'm sorry." "As am I." She secured the bandage with practiced efficiency. "But sorrow doesn't pay bills or keep a store running, one adapts." "Is that why you've rebuffed Reynolds' attentions?" "Still grieving." She stepped back, wiping her hands on a towel. "That's rather direct, Mr. Lawson." "Forgive me, it's not my business." "No, it isn't." She gathered her supplies. "But since you've asked, my reluctance has nothing to do with grief and everything to do with the man himself. Victor Reynolds views people as possessions. I've no interest in being acquired." Noah nodded, recognizing the steel beneath her composed exterior. "He doesn't strike me as a man accustomed to being refused." "He isn't, which makes my continued refusal all the more necessary." She handed him his shirt. "You should rest that shoulder." "No heavy lifting for at least 2 days." "The Hendersons won't appreciate that." "I'll speak with Sarah Henderson, she'll understand." Noah carefully pulled his shirt back on, buttoning it with one hand. "Why would you do that for me?" Zara's expression softened slightly. "Because you saved Thomas Miller today without a thought for yourself, because kindness shouldn't be such a rare commodity that we question it when it appears." She paused. "And because I suspect you're not accustomed to having anyone look out for your interests." The accuracy of her assessment was discomfiting. "Thank you, Mrs. Goodwin." "Zara," she said, "if I'm to bandage your wounds and intercede with your employer, we might as well dispense with formalities." "Zara," he repeated, the name feeling right on his tongue. "Then I'm Noah." "Noah," she smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. "You should come for dinner tomorrow evening, 7 o'clock, to repay you for Thomas's life." He knew he should refuse. Getting closer to anyone in Riversbend contradicted his plans, his habits, his very survival instincts. Yet he found himself nodding. "I'd like that." Walking back to his rented room later, shoulder aching but bandaged with care, Noah tried to convince himself that accepting the invitation was merely politeness. The lie felt hollow, even to himself. Dinner with Zara proved to be unexpectedly comfortable. She prepared a simple but delicious meal of roast chicken, potatoes, and fresh bread that surpassed anything Noah had eaten in months of trail cooking and saloon fare. Their conversation flowed naturally, skimming from topics as mundane as the changing weather to the more substantial question of the railroad's potential arrival in the coming years. It would change everything, Zara said, pouring coffee after they'd finished eating. For the store certainly, but for the entire region. Not all change is improvement, Noah replied. I've seen towns boom with the railroad, then collapse when the initial rush fades. Perhaps, but isolation has its costs too. She settled across from him, cradling her cup. What do you think you'll do when the West is tamed and settled? When there's nowhere left to wander. The question caught him off guard. He'd never considered an end to his travels, as if movement itself was his permanent state. I suppose I'd have to find a place worth stopping for. And what would make a place worth stopping for? He considered the questions seriously. Good grazing land, clean water, maybe a view of mountains. He paused. A community where a man's past matters less than his present actions. She nodded. That last one is rare indeed. What about you? He asked. Will you stay in Riversbend, run the store indefinitely? For now, it suits my needs. I have independence here, hard one though it was. She traced the rim of her cup thoughtfully. But I do sometimes wonder what lies beyond those mountains. You could find out. Her smile held a trace of wistfulness. Women don't have the luxury of wandering, Noah, not safely, not alone. You could go with, he stopped himself before completing the thought. With whom? She prompted, her eyes meeting his directly. He evaded the implication. With a group. Wagon trains head west regularly. Ah, she set down her cup. Yes, I suppose that would be one option. The conversation shifted to safer topics, but something had changed between them, an unspoken possibility acknowledged and then carefully set aside. When Noah finally took his leave, Zara walked him to the door. Thank you for coming, she said. It's been refreshing to have conversation that doesn't revolve around merchandise orders or town gossip. The pleasure was mine, he hesitated at the threshold. I should warn you, I've never been good at staying in one place. 2 weeks with the Hendersons is already longer than I typically linger anywhere. Her expression remained serene. I'm not asking you to stay, Noah. I simply enjoyed your company this evening. Even so, he felt compelled to be honest. I don't want to, you should know that I'll be moving on. We all move on in our own ways, she touched his arm briefly. Good night. He walked back to his lodgings with his thoughts in turmoil. He'd meant to clarify boundaries, to prevent misunderstandings, yet her calm acceptance of his imminent departure left him feeling strangely bereft, as if he'd been the one harboring expectations he hadn't recognized until that moment. The following days brought increased activity as the Hendersons prepared for their cattle drive. Noah threw himself into the work, his shoulder healing quickly enough to resume full duties. He found legitimate reasons to visit town, supplies needed, messages to deliver, and each time he made his way to Zara's store. Their interactions remained friendly but measured, a careful distance maintained by mutual unspoken agreement. Yet Noah found himself noticing details about her that seemed to imprint themselves on his memory. The way she tucked loose strands of hair behind her ear when concentrating, how she hummed softly while tallying accounts, the precise movements of her hands as she wrapped purchases. On the eve of the cattle drive's departure, Noah visited the store one last time. The Hendersons had asked him to stay on after the drive, offering permanent employment that would mean settling in Riversbend. He'd told them he needed time to consider, though his instinct was to refuse. A month in one place already felt dangerously close to putting down roots. The store was empty when he entered except for Zara, who was updating a ledger behind the counter. She looked up at the sound of the bell, her face brightening when she saw him. Noah, I heard you're leaving tomorrow with the herd. That's right, we'll be gone about 3 weeks, assuming the weather holds. She closed her ledger. Do you need supplies for the journey? No, the Hendersons have provided everything. He moved closer to the counter, his hat in his hands. I just wanted to say goodbye. And thank you for your hospitality. Will you be returning with the herd? She asked, her tone carefully neutral. Before he could answer, the door opened with such force that the bell nearly tore from its mounting. Victor Reynolds strode in, his face flushed with anger, a folded paper clutched in his hand. Is this your doing? He demanded, slapping the paper down before Zara. She glanced at it, her expression revealing nothing. The town council minutes. I'm the recording secretary, yes. You know what I mean. He jabbed his finger at a section of the document. The unanimous vote against my proposal to expand the mining operation. After I spent weeks securing commitments from each council member. The council reconsidered after reviewing the environmental impact report, Zara replied evenly. The proposed expansion would contaminate the town's water supply. Reports can be interpreted different ways, Reynolds snarled, and votes can be influenced. You've been poisoning the council against me for months. Noah stepped forward. That's enough, Reynolds. The mine owner rounded on him. Stay out of this, Drifter, this is town business. Threatening a lady in her own store is everybody's business, Noah replied, his voice deceptively calm. Reynolds' eyes narrowed. So that's how it is the widow's found herself protection. He turned back to Zara. Is that why you've been refusing my offers, already warming another man's bed? The accusation hung in the air for one pregnant moment before Noah's fist connected with Reynolds' jaw, sending him staggering back against a display of canned goods that collapsed with a crash. Apologize to the lady, Noah said, standing over him. Reynolds wiped blood from his split lip, his eyes cold with fury. You've made a serious mistake, Lawson. I own half this town. Yet apparently not Mrs. Goodwin. Noah's hand rested near his holster, not drawing but making the possibility clear. Apologize. For a tense moment, it seemed Reynolds might escalate the confrontation. Then with a tight smile, he pushed himself up from the floor. My apologies for the implication, Mrs. Goodwin. The disagreement with the council upset me. Zara's face remained composed, though Noah could see the slight tremor in her hands. Perhaps in the future, you could express your concerns to the council directly, rather than accosting me in my place of business. Reynolds straightened his jacket, his dignity somewhat restored. Indeed. Good day to you both, he paused at the door. Lawson, men like you come and go, remember that. The threat in his words was unmistakable. After he left, Noah turned to Zara. Are you all right? She nodded, moving to clean up the fallen merchandise. I'm fine, though I fear you've made an enemy. Wouldn't be the first. He knelt to help her gather the scattered cans. Has he threatened you before? Not so directly, she sighed. Victor Reynolds is used to getting his way. When I first took over the store after James died, he offered to help manage it for me. When I declined, he began pursuing me with increasingly persistent attention. When that failed, he tried to pressure me through business, raising the rent on the store building, which he owns. And the council business. He proposed expanding his mining operation to an area that would have destroyed the watershed. I presented evidence of the damage it would cause, she shrugged. The council voted accordingly. You stood against him publicly. Noah's respect for her courage increased. That took nerve. It took common sense. We all need clean water. She placed the last can back on the shelf. But yes, he's not accustomed to opposition, especially from a woman. Noah studied her, seeing now the quiet strength that had allowed her to carve out independence in a world that offered few opportunities for women alone. The Hendersons offered me a permanent position, he said suddenly. She looked up, surprise evident in her expression. Are you considering it? I don't know, he ran a hand through his hair. I never stay anywhere long. Because you prefer freedom, or because you're running from something? The directness of her question deserved honesty. Both, I suppose. There was trouble back in Wyoming. A man died. Did you kill him? Her voice held no judgment. No, but I couldn't save him either. The memory of Tom Barlow bleeding out in his arms still haunted his dreams. His brother blamed me. Swore revenge. So you keep moving to stay ahead of him. At first, then it became habit. Easier not to form attachments that would only be broken when I inevitably moved on. She nodded slowly, and has it worked? This strategy of avoiding connections. Noah thought of the lonely nights on the trail, the nameless towns, the faces that blurred together in his memory. It's kept me alive. That's not what I asked, she said gently. He met her gaze, finding unexpected understanding there. No. I suppose it hasn't worked entirely as intended. A moment of silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Finally, Zara spoke. The cattle drive leaves tomorrow. You have 3 weeks to decide what you want. And if what I want isn't clear. Her smile was tinged with sadness, then perhaps that's an answer in itself. The cattle drive proved more challenging than anticipated. Unseasonable rains swelled rivers, turning crossings into perilous undertakings. A section of the herd spooked during a thunderstorm, requiring hours of work to gather the scattered cattle. Through it all, Noah worked tirelessly, earning the respect of even the most seasoned hands. Yet his thoughts frequently returned to Riversbend, to the store with its neat shelves, to the quiet dinner conversation, to blue eyes that seemed to see past his carefully constructed defenses. He found himself wondering what Zara was doing at various moments of the day, imagining her tending to customers or updating her ledgers with meticulous care. These thoughts troubled him. Attachment meant vulnerability, and vulnerability had cost him dearly in the past. Better to move on after the drive, to continue the rootless existence that had served him thus far. Yet the prospect no longer held the appeal it once had. 2 weeks into the journey, disaster struck. The chuck wagon's axle broke while crossing rocky terrain, spilling supplies and injuring the cook. Noah volunteered to ride back to Riversbend for replacements and a replacement cook if one could be found. The return journey took a day and a half of hard riding. As he approached the town, an unusual plume of smoke on the horizon quickened his pace. Drawing closer, he realized with mounting dread that the smoke rose from the very center of Riversbend. The scene that greeted him was chaos. A fire had broken out in the hotel and spread to adjacent buildings, including the general store. Townspeople formed a bucket brigade from the well to the burning structures, fighting desperately to contain the blaze. Noah dismounted near the church, which had become a makeshift aid station. "What happened?" he asked a soot-covered man. "Started in the hotel kitchen, they say. Wind carried it to the next buildings." The man coughed. "We're losing the whole block." "The store, was anyone inside?" "Don't know, most folks got out." The man hurried back toward the bucket line. Heart-pounding, Noah scanned the crowd for Zara's familiar figure. Not finding her, he approached the nearest organized group led by the town sheriff. "Sheriff, where's Mrs. Goodwin? Is she safe?" The sheriff shook his head. "Haven't seen her. Some folks said she was in the store when it started, taking inventory." Without hesitation, Noah ran toward the burning building. The front of the store was already engulfed, windows shattered from the heat, black smoke pouring from the doorway. "Zara," he shouted, circling to the back of the building where the fire seemed less intense. Finding the rear door, he wrapped his bandana around his face, took a deep breath, and plunged inside. The smoke was disorienting, stinging his eyes and making it nearly impossible to see. Heat pressed against him like a physical force. "Zara," he called again, dropping to his knees where the air was marginally clearer. A faint sound drew him toward the counter area. There, collapsed on the floor, lay Zara. She was unconscious, a deep gash on her forehead suggesting she'd been struck by falling debris. Noah gathered her in his arms and retraced his steps, lung burning, eyes watering. The rear wall had begun to catch fire as he reached the door, flames licking up the wooden frame. With one final surge of strength, he burst through into the relative coolness of the alley, carrying Zara's limp form to safety. Willing hands helped them both away from the burning building. Someone brought water. Another person, the doctor, knelt to examine Zara's injuries. "Smoke inhalation, concussion from the look of that head wound," the doctor murmured. "Get her to the church with the others." Noah refused to relinquish her to others, carrying her himself to the makeshift hospital. Only when she was settled on a pallet did he allow his own injuries to be treated: minor burns on his hands and arms, a scorched section of hair, lungs raw from smoke. Hours passed as the townsfolk fought the blaze. By dusk, they had contained it, though several buildings, including the store, were destroyed. Noah remained by Zara's side, watching for any sign of consciousness, fear gnawing at him as she remained still. "You were a fool to go in there," the doctor told him bluntly. "Could have lost you both." "Wasn't a choice," Noah replied simply. As night fell, Zara finally stirred, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment, confusion clouded her features, then recognition dawned. "Noah," her voice was raspy from smoke. "I'm here." He took her hand gently. "Don't try to talk too much. You inhaled a lot of smoke." She looked around, taking in their surroundings and the other injured townspeople. Understanding dawned in her eyes. The store. He hesitated, then answered honestly, "It's gone, I'm sorry." Tears welled in her eyes. "Everything I had. You're alive, that's what matters." She squeezed his hand weakly. "You came back early." Supply run for the drive, saw the smoke from outside town. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "When I couldn't find you. You came into the burning building. It wasn't a question. You could have been killed." "So could you." He didn't mention how his heart had seemed to stop at the thought of her trapped in the flames, how nothing else had mattered in that moment but reaching her. "Rest now, we'll figure everything out tomorrow." She closed her eyes, exhaustion claiming her again. Noah continued his vigil through the night, reluctant to leave her side even when others offered to relieve him. By morning, the full extent of the damage was clear. The hotel, the store, and 2 other buildings were complete losses. Miraculously, no lives had been lost, though several people, including Zara, had sustained injuries. The town gathered for an emergency meeting in the church. Noah helped Zara attend, supporting her as she walked slowly down the aisle to a seat near the front. Her face was pale, the bandage on her forehead stark against her skin, but her eyes were clear and determined. The mayor outlined the immediate needs: shelter for those displaced, rebuilding plans, insurance claims. When discussion turned to the cause of the fire, a murmur ran through the congregation. "It wasn't no accident," declared the blacksmith. "I was passing the hotel when it started. Saw a man running from the back just before the flames caught." "Did you recognize him?" asked the sheriff. Too dark to see clear, but he was tall, well-dressed, heading toward the livery. Noah felt Zara stiffen beside him. "Reynolds," she whispered. The sheriff heard her. "That's a serious accusation, Mrs. Goodwin." "Is it?" She struggled to her feet. "Victor threatened me the day before yesterday, after the council rejected his mining proposal." He was furious. "Threatening ain't the same as arson," someone objected. "No," agreed the sheriff, "but it bears investigation. Anyone seen Reynolds since the fire?" No one had. A quick check of the hotel register showed he'd checked out yesterday afternoon, ostensibly to visit his mine holdings outside town. After the meeting, Noah helped Zara to the small room behind the church that had been offered as temporary accommodation. "You think Reynolds started the fire deliberately?" he asked once they were alone. "I don't know for certain," she admitted, easing herself onto the narrow bed, "but the timing and his anger was real." "If he did, he'll answer for it," Noah promised, his jaw set. "Noah," she caught his hand. "Don't do anything rash, we need proof." He recognized the wisdom in her caution. "You're right, but I'm not letting this go." "I know," she looked around the sparse room. "I need to take stock. Figure out what I can salvage, what insurance might cover. Start planning to rebuild." "Rebuild?" He was surprised by her immediate determination. "Zara, you nearly died." "And what's the alternative? Give up, leave?" She shook her head. "This is my home, Noah, my life. One fire doesn't change that." Her resilience humbled him. While he'd spent years running at the first sign of trouble, she faced catastrophe with unwavering resolve to rebuild. "What can I do to help?" he asked. "Don't you need to return to the cattle drive?" He'd almost forgotten his original mission. "Yes, but—" "Then go, do what you need to do." Her voice was gentle but firm. "Riversbend will still be here when you return." The unspoken question hung between them. Would he return, or would this be where their paths diverged? Noah found himself unexpectedly torn. The logical choice was to deliver the supplies, complete the drive, collect his pay, and move on just as he always had. Yet the thought of leaving Zara to face rebuilding alone, with Reynolds possibly still a threat, sat like a stone in his stomach. "I'll be back," he said, the decision crystallizing as he spoke the words. 3 days to deliver supplies and explain the situation to the Hendersons. Then I'm coming back to help you rebuild. She studied his face, searching for conviction behind the promise. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her. "I'll be here." The return to the cattle drive was swift. His explanation of events in town met with concern by the Hendersons. They agreed to continue with a temporary cook from among the hands and gave Noah permission to return to Riversbend with a portion of his wages advanced. "That young widow means something to you," John Henderson observed as Noah prepared to depart. "She's a good woman who suffered a terrible loss," Noah replied carefully. The older man smiled knowingly. "Offer stands for permanent work when you're ready. I suspect you might have reason to consider it more seriously now." Noah didn't contradict him. The possibility of staying, of building something lasting, no longer seemed as impossible as it once had. He arrived back in Riversbend to find the cleanup already underway. The burned buildings had been cordoned off, and teams of volunteers were clearing debris. He found Zara at the ruins of her store, carefully sifting through charred remains for anything salvageable. She looked up as his shadow fell across the blackened floorboards, her face brightening. "You came back." "I said I would." He dismounted, tying his horse to a nearby post. "Any luck?" "The safe survived." She gestured to the heavy metal box that had been pulled from the rubble. "Account books, some cash, important papers, not much else." He surveyed the destruction. Have you decided what you'll do? Rebuild, of course. I've already spoken with the bank. Between insurance and savings, I can manage it. She wiped soot from her hands. It will be smaller at first, but I can expand again as business recovers. Any word on Reynolds? Her expression darkened. The sheriff rode out to the mine yesterday. Reynolds claims he was there all night with witnesses to prove it. Convenient witnesses, I'd wager. Most likely, but without proof, she sighed. The official determination is accident due to a kitchen fire. Noah frowned. That doesn't sit right. No, but dwelling on it won't rebuild my store. She touched his arm. I'm glad you're here, Noah, truly. In the days that followed, Noah threw himself into the rebuilding efforts. His skills as a carpenter, honed during various jobs across the West, proved valuable. He worked alongside local craftsmen to design a new store that would be more fire-resistant than its predecessor. Zara secured temporary space in a corner of the feed store to maintain some business while construction proceeded. Noah watched her adapt to each new challenge with admirable flexibility, haggling with suppliers, revising inventory lists from memory, reassuring longtime customers that she would soon be fully operational again. Their relationship deepened through shared labor and purpose. Evenings found them reviewing plans over simple meals, their conversations ranging from practical concerns to deeper reflections on life's unexpected turns. Noah found himself sharing stories of his travels that he'd never told another soul. The beauty of sunrise over the Tetons, the loneliness of Arizona deserts, the colorful characters he'd encountered along the way. In turn, Zara revealed more of herself, her childhood in St. Louis, her whirlwind courtship with James, her determination to maintain independence after his death. Everyone expected me to sell the store and either remarry quickly or return to my parents, she told him one evening. As if I couldn't possibly manage on my own. Their mistake, Noah replied, admiring her spirit. What about you, she asked, you never speak of family. Not much to tell, father died when I was 17. Mother passed a few years before that, no siblings. He stared into his coffee cup. Worked ranches in Nebraska, then Wyoming, that's where, he hesitated. Where your friend died, she prompted gently. He nodded. Tom Barlow. We were moving cattle when rustlers hit us. Tom took a bullet meant for me. His brother Marcus was convinced I'd somehow set Tom up, swore he'd hunt me down. So you've been running all this time. At first, he met her gaze. Then it became easier to keep moving than to stop. No attachments, no responsibilities beyond the next day's ride. And now, her question was soft but direct. Now I'm not so sure that's enough anymore. He reached across the table, taking her hand. Zara, A sharp knock interrupted whatever he might have said. The sheriff stood at the door, his expression grim. Evening, Mrs. Goodwin, Lawson. He removed his hat. Thought you should know, Reynolds was found dead at his mine this morning. Zara gasped. Dead how? Shot twice in the chest. The sheriff's gaze shifted to Noah. Where were you yesterday afternoon, Lawson? Noah stiffened at the implication. Here in town, working on the store foundation with Daniels and his crew. Can anyone verify your whereabouts between 4 and 6? I can, Zara interjected. Noah was helping me inventory salvaged goods during that time. The sheriff nodded, though his expression remained skeptical. I'll need official statements from both of you. Reynolds' foreman claims he heard the deceased arguing with someone matching your description shortly before his death. That's impossible, Zara protested. Noah hasn't left town. Nevertheless, I need to investigate all possibilities. The sheriff replaced his hat. Come by my office first thing tomorrow. After he left, Noah turned to Zara. You know I didn't do this. Of course I know that, she squeezed his hand, but someone wants you to be suspected. The foreman, he's lying. But why? Noah paced the small room, to protect the real killer. Or because Reynolds instructed him to blame me if anything happened. You think Reynolds anticipated his own murder? I think a man like that makes enemies and plans contingencies. Noah ran a hand through his hair. This complicates things. Zara stood, moving to his side. We'll clear your name, the truth will come out. Her faith in him was both comforting and terrifying. Comforting because he desperately wanted to deserve it. Terrifying because it meant she cared enough to stand by him despite the danger. Zara, he said quietly, if this gets ugly, I might need to leave. I won't have you caught in the crossfire. Her eyes flashed with determination. Running won't solve this. It would only make you look guilty. Better guilty than seeing you hurt because of me. She took his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her gaze. Listen to me, Noah Lawson. I've lost a husband, a store, and nearly my life in the past year. I'm still standing. Don't you dare make decisions for me based on some misguided notion of protection. The fierceness of her declaration stunned him into silence. Then, without conscious thought, he leaned forward and kissed her, a gentle touch that deepened as she responded with equal fervor. When they finally parted, breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. I'm not going anywhere, he promised. We'll face this together. The investigation into Reynolds' murder proceeded slowly. Noah provided his statement, as did Zara and several workmen who corroborated their whereabouts during the crucial hours. The foreman maintained his accusation, though no other evidence emerged to support it. Meanwhile, rebuilding continued. The new store took shape, its sturdy frame rising from the ashes of its predecessor. Noah worked tirelessly, pouring his energy into creating something permanent for the first time in years. 3 weeks after Reynolds' death, a breakthrough came. A prospector reported finding an abandoned camp in the hills near the mine, containing personal effects that suggested the recent presence of Marcus Barlow, the vengeful brother who had sworn to kill Noah. He must have followed you to Riversbend, the sheriff theorized. Saw your confrontation with Reynolds in the store, then used the opportunity. Kill Reynolds and frame me, Noah said grimly, 2 birds with 1 stone. And the fire, Zara asked, could Barlow have started it? The sheriff nodded. Possibly create chaos, hope you die in it, Lawson. When that failed, he moved to plan B. Is there any sign of him now? Noah asked, tension evident in his voice. None, but I've sent telegrams to surrounding towns. If he's still in the territory, we'll find him. The possibility that Barlow had been watching him, had endangered Zara in an attempt to reach him, filled Noah with cold dread. That night after walking Zara home, he made a decision that tore at his heart. I need to draw him out, he told her. Away from town, away from you. No, her response was immediate and vehement. That's exactly what he wants, to isolate you. Zara, as long as I'm here, you're in danger. The store, the town, he's shown he's willing to burn it all to get to me. Then we face him together, she gripped his hands tightly. The sheriff knows now, the town is alert, running plays into his hands. And staying puts you directly in harm's way. She stepped closer, her blue eyes fierce. I'm already in harm's way, Noah. I was from the moment you pulled me from that fire. Do you think Barlow will simply leave me alone if you go, or will he use me to draw you back? The logic of her argument was undeniable, yet the fear of losing her remained overwhelming. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of me. And I couldn't bear it if you sacrificed yourself out of some misplaced sense of nobility. She softened her tone. Noah, for years you've run from connection, from putting down roots. Don't use Barlow as another excuse to keep running. Her words struck at the core of his fears, not just of Barlow's revenge, but of his own capacity for commitment, for building something lasting in a world where everything seemed temporary. Stay, she whispered. Fight for what we're building here, together. In that moment, looking into her eyes, Noah recognized the truth he'd been avoiding. Somewhere between pulling her from the burning store and laying the foundation for its replacement, he had fallen in love with Zara Goodwin. The realization was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Together, he agreed, drawing her close. Their vigilance was rewarded sooner than expected. 2 days later, as Noah worked alone on the store's interior framing, he sensed rather than heard someone enter behind him. Finally stopped running, Lawson. The voice was hard, bitter with years of nurtured hatred. Noah turned slowly to face Marcus Barlow. The man was leaner than he remembered, his face weathered, eyes burning with unchanged fury. He held a revolver aimed steadily at Noah's chest. Hello, Marcus. Noah kept his tone even, his hands visible. It's been a long time. Not long enough. Barlow stepped further into the unfinished building. You look settled. Building something permanent, something that can burn. Reynolds' fire, that was you. Barlow's smile was cold, convenient timing. The man was already planning something against your woman's store. I just helped it along. And then you killed him and tried to frame me. Noah's mind raced, calculating distances, options. His own revolver hung from a nail several feet away, out of reach. Poetic justice. You get the blame for once. Barlow's finger tightened on the trigger, but I decided I'd rather see your face when you die, like Tom did. Your brother was my friend, Noah said quietly. His death has haunted me every day. But I didn't betray him, Marcus. I tried to save him. Lies. Barlow's hand trembled slightly. You were supposed to watch his back. I was, but there were too many of them. The memory of that day surfaced with painful clarity. Tom stepped in front of me when they started shooting. I didn't ask him to. Never would have. Shut up, Barlow's face contorted with grief and rage. You don't get to talk about him. He was a good man, brave, loyal. Noah took a careful step forward. He wouldn't want this, Marcus. You destroying your life with revenge. Stay back, Barlow raised the gun higher. It's too late for talk. Is it? Noah stopped moving. You've had plenty of chances to kill me these past weeks. Yet here we are talking. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Barlow's face. I wanted you to suffer first, see everything you love destroyed. Like the store, like trying to hurt an innocent woman who never did you any harm. Noah's voice hardened. That's not justice, Marcus. That's becoming the very thing you claim to hate. For a moment it seemed his words might reach through Barlow's hatred. Then the man's expression hardened again. Enough. Time to finish this. As his finger tightened on the trigger, a voice rang out from the doorway. Drop the gun, Barlow. The sheriff stood with his own weapon drawn, Zara slightly behind him. The momentary distraction was all Noah needed. He lunged forward, knocking Barlow's arm upward as the gun discharged, the bullet splintering a roof beam overhead. They grappled for control of the weapon, crashing into half-built walls and stacks of lumber. Noah's greater strength began to prevail, but Barlow fought with the desperate energy of a man with nothing left to lose. Noah! Zara's cry alerted him to the knife Barlow had drawn with his free hand. He twisted away, feeling the blade slice across his ribs rather than plunge into his heart as intended. The sheriff moved in, but the confined space made it impossible for him to get a clear shot. Stand down, Barlow, he ordered. With a roar of frustration, Barlow broke free of Noah's grip and lunged toward Zara, clearly intending to use her as leverage. Noah reacted instantly, diving forward to tackle him before he could reach her. They crashed through the partially constructed front window, landing hard on the street outside. The impact knocked the breath from Noah's lungs, but he maintained his hold on Barlow, pinning him as the sheriff rushed to assist. Within moments, Barlow was disarmed and restrained. As he was led away, he turned back toward Noah with eyes hollow with defeat. It won't bring Tom back, he said, his voice suddenly empty of its former rage. Nothing will. No, Noah agreed, holding a hand to his bleeding side, but neither would killing me. Zara was at his side immediately, examining his wound with trembling hands. We need the doctor. It's not deep, he assured her, though the pain suggested otherwise. Don't you dare minimize this, she said fiercely, pressing a cloth against the cut. I almost lost you. The raw emotion in her voice cut deeper than Barlow's knife. I'm still here, he said softly, touching her face. I'm not going anywhere. Later, bandaged and resting in Zara's home, Noah reflected on the day's events. Barlow's capture had closed a chapter of his life that had remained unfinished for years. The constant looking over his shoulder, the reflexive distrust, the habit of leaving before connections grew too deep, all had roots in that blood-soaked day in Wyoming and its aftermath. Zara joined him, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. The sheriff says Barlow's confessed to everything. Reynolds' murder, the fire. He'll be taken to the territorial prison tomorrow. Noah nodded, relief mingling with an unexpected pity for the man consumed by misplaced vengeance. It's over then. One chapter is, she took his hand, what about the next one? The question hung between them, laden with possibility. Noah thought of the store rising from its ashes, of the community that had rallied around them, of the woman beside him who had faced fire and threat without flinching. I told John Henderson I wouldn't be returning to the ranch, he said. Asked him to send my things with the next supply wagon. Hope brightened her eyes. You're staying in Riversbend. If you'll have me, he squeezed her hand. I'm done running, Zara. For the first time in years I've found someone worth staying for. Tears welled in her eyes. I was so afraid you'd leave once Barlow was caught, that you'd fall back into old habits. I considered it, he admitted. Thought it might be safer for you if I moved on, but then I realized something. What? He drew her closer, wincing slightly at the pull on his injured side. That the worst danger isn't from men like Barlow. It's from living half a life, from never allowing yourself to build something real because you're afraid to lose it. She smiled through her tears. For a man who claims to be uneducated, you've learned some important truths. I had an excellent teacher, he touched her cheek gently. Marry me, Zara, help me build something permanent, something that will last longer than both of us. Her answer was in her kiss, tender yet passionate, full of promise and shared dreams. When they finally parted, she whispered against his lips, yes, 1,000 times yes. 3 months later, as summer gave way to autumn, Noah stood beneath an arch of wildflowers outside the newly rebuilt store. The entire town had turned out for the double celebration, the reopening of Goodwin's general store and the marriage of its proprietress to the man who had helped rebuild it. Zara approached on the arm of Pastor Williams, radiant in a gown of ivory silk, her chestnut hair adorned with tiny white blossoms. As she reached Noah, her smile outshone the October sun. Dearly beloved, the pastor began, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. We gather to witness the union of two souls who have found in each other the courage to begin anew. Noah barely heard the words that followed, his attention fixed on the woman before him. In her eyes he saw not just their past, the fire, the danger, the healing, but their future, a home built together, children perhaps, years of shared joys and sorrows. For a man who had spent years believing the frontier was no place for lasting connection, it was a revelation. The wilderness hadn't tamed him, love had, not by weakening him, but by giving him something worth fighting for, worth staying for. When the time came to speak his vows, Noah's voice rang clear and certain. I, Noah, take you, Zara, as my wife, my partner, my home. Where you are is where I belong. What we build together will endure. This I promise now and always. Zara's answering vows were equally heartfelt, her voice steady despite the tears that shimmered in her eyes. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that rose from the townspeople seemed to echo Noah's own jubilant heart. Later, as they welcomed guests into the new store for the reception, Noah marveled at the transformation. Phoenix-like, it had risen larger and more beautiful than before. Much like their love, he reflected, forged in fire, tested by adversity, emerging stronger for the trials endured. Happy? Zara asked, joining him by the window where he stood watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. More than I believed possible. He drew her close, breathing in the lavender scent of her hair. You know, I spent years thinking freedom meant having no ties, no responsibilities. And now, he turned her gently to face the gathering, friends and neighbors sharing food and laughter, the store humming with life and possibility, the small community that had become his own. Now I know true freedom is having a place to return to, a place where you're known and loved not despite your scars but because of how you earned them. He kissed her softly. You're my home, Zara Lawson. Wherever we go from here, we go together. As twilight deepened into night, Noah and Zara slipped away from the celebration to the small house behind the store. Their house now, the first true home he'd known since childhood. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adventures, but for the first time in his adult life, Noah Lawson would face them with roots firmly planted and his heart securely anchored. The cowboy who had found fleeting love in countless towns across the frontier had finally discovered a love worth stopping for, a love that promised not just passion but partnership, not just comfort but courage. In Zara's arms, he had found not the end of his journey, but its true beginning.